Hall, and it used to stand across the street right there. It was a former City Hall. One of my commissioners come down and hold this. We'll improvise.
It's like Vanna White.
It was built in approximately 1852 by H.W. It was built in 1852 by H.W. Starr, a Burlington attorney. It was built to house law offices and an assembly and meeting place. Over the years, it served as an opera house, a church, a high school, a courthouse, a library, a jail, and a city hall, which started in 1883. The third floor was a banquet hall, which was also used for city council meetings. During my research of this
I'm
building,
here to get the admission. Did you all bring the dollar?
I found that there were two events that really stood out to me in the history of this building. The first was a commemoration ceremony celebrating the completion of the Burlington Railroad to Burlington. The mayor of Chicago, along with the Secretary of War, were among the speakers who traveled by train to speak at the ceremony. The other event was a trial for an escaped slave called Dick, as he awaited the verdict of whether he would be freed or sent back to his master. There was a book published on this, and a quote from the book says, "When it came time for the witness, who was the son of the slave owner, to identify Dick as property of Mr. Rutherford, his son said that he could not make an identification. He said, pointing at Dick, the escaped slave, 'I have never seen this man before now.' It was written that a great cheer went up in the hearing room, out into the hallway, onto the streets, where 1,000 people who had gathered to hear the outcome of the hearing joined to send hurrahs from hill to hill in the fair city of Burlington." I thought that was a cool bit of history, that there were thousands of people gathered out here for that trial. So this hall, or this building, was torn down in 1923, 1924, when this new city hall was built. Now we'll move around the front to take a look at the cornerstone and the architectural style of the city hall, known as Corinthian.
So what was the Y went in after that?
Yeah. So there was a Y building behind it, right there, I believe.
Yeah.
I just got here late. You were talking about Marion Hall?
Yeah.
Okay.
Are there any other questions on Marion Hall, or any other comments on it?
What year was the Y built?
I'm not sure what year the Y was built. So as you pass this corner, the cornerstone is located behind a tree, so you kind of have to move the brush to see it, but you can see it's engraved with the date of construction. Not sure why it's covered up now, but when it was first built, there were floodlights along the front of the building that would light it up from below. Now there's just drums.
Is there any kind of a time capsule or anything?
Not that I've read about yet.
Okay.
Yeah. The vaults down in the basement are kind of a time capsule themselves. Move around to the front here. The new city hall was built in the architectural style Corinthian. It was decided that it should be of classical design. It was erected on the same street but a block away from the Masonic Temple, and as a matter of conformity, it was decided that the municipal building should be of the same general style of architecture but varied in detail. The Corinthian, which is the most ornamental of the classical orders, was selected because of its graceful beauty and its contrast from the simpler, sturdier Tuscan style embodied by the Masonic Temple. The Masonic Temple is still standing across the street down in that direction. So this building was constructed to be a contrast with that. Mark, do you want to talk a little bit more about the Corinthian style of architecture?
Sure. There's basically three classical orders of architecture, and they're best defined by the parts of the columns. The oldest is actually the Doric style. It's very simple. It's kind of got like a little dinner plate at the top, which is the capital. These are the bases. All the styles could have simple round columns, or they could be fluted. The next style would be the Tuscan. It's a little bit more ornamental, and at the capitals they have scrolls, as opposed to the Corinthian, which has the acacia leaves up at the top. The original Doric was actually a modification, a Greek modification of earlier Egyptian columns, which were modeled after kind of a bundle of reeds. So that's where they got the inspiration for these. They're also, I mean, this particular building is a great example of the Corinthian order used in classic revival architecture.
They're characterized by the fluted columns and then the campuses, is that what they're called?
Yeah, at the column capitals, and then on top of that is the entablature, which is made up of a number of different architectural parts. If you'd like, I have a couple of sheets that kind of describe the different orders and the different parts of classic architecture. But it all came from the Greeks, essentially. And back in the early 1900s, there was a period where there was a lot of interest in the older classic styles of architecture, especially with civic buildings.
All right, let's move back into the air conditioning.
Details, like around the doorway. So these are the eggs, these are the darts. You'll see that repeated. One thing I always like to point out are how classical columns taper. What's the word?
Antithesis, yeah.
Okay. So when you buy a column at Menards or Lowe's or something, to replace it on the front porch, it's usually just straight. And typical classical columns don't do that; they taper. And part of that is because it's a little more graceful, but it also makes the building look a little bit taller.
Yeah.
Because things look smaller as they recede. So you see these are larger at the base than they are at the top.
Yeah, well, thanks. That's an important aspect of columns.
And then, did you mention the material?
No.
So the other thing while we're out here is the building, like what's now Prusa and like what's now was the Masonic Temple still is Indiana Bedford limestone, which is a really finely grained limestone. Is really commonly used in civic buildings.
Where was it quoted at?
Indiana. I would probably like the whole breaking away, the stone quarries around Bloomington, Indiana. I think those are Bedford limestone quarries.
One of the large selling points of the City Hall is that it was completely fireproof, which was not common for a building of the time.
If you go to Lebanon, Indiana, and look at the county seat building, it has Indiana lime, the tallest single pieces supposedly in the world of the United States that are not pieces of stone on the courthouse.
I was there last year. I'm gonna have to look there.
Yeah, and so if you're ever near Lebanon, Indiana, it's worth seeing that building.
In March of 1922, the voters of Burlington decreed that they wanted a new city hall. This came only 2 months after a petition for a new city hall had been resolved by the Greater Burlington Association, which is now known as the Greater Burlington Partnership, as well as the Women's Bureau. When the question was submitted to voters on March 27th of 1922, there were 4,365 votes in favor and 2,864 votes against, meaning it passed. About 3 years before this vote, discussion of a new city hall had come into being when Captain Charles Wilner had bequeathed $10,000 for building a new city hall, provided that work started within 5 years of his death. Herman Weinrich, another civics figure in Burlington, also added $5,000 to that fund. And in appreciation of their donation, there is a plaque to those two men right there on the building. So the construction of City Hall was started within that 5-year time frame, so that the city could make use of their $15,000 donation. The site of City Hall is at the corner of 4th and Washington Street, which is the site of the old homestead of the late Judge David Rohrer, which in its day was one of the best known homes in Burlington. We have 2 pictures of this. This is the earliest photo that we were able to get, and then there's a newer one in the top center right there of the house. The house that used to occupy the site was built around 1840 and by one of Burlington's earliest and most prominent citizens, Judge David Rohrer. He was an attorney, businessman, large property owner, and civic activist. He was on the town's first board of trustees, wrote the Articles of Incorporation, and platted the first streets. Rohrer was also one of 4 prominent civic leaders who got together and came up with the nickname Hawkeyes from the new Iowa Territory. The Rohr family occupied the house until his death in 1884. The family then leased it to a group of prominent businessmen for use as the Shaka Khan Club. This picture here is from 1878, I believe, is when it was being used as the Shaka Khan Club, for 1887. After considerable controversy late in 1922, the City Council chose this site as the site for the new City Hall, and it was purchased from the daughter of Judge Rohr for $15,000. A figure that was regarded as very reasonable, also the exact amount of money that was donated by the two men from earlier. The construction of the City Hall, including the furnishings, was $170,000, which in today's dollars is about $3 million. The building facing Washington Street that we just looked at measures 96 by 49 feet and is 3 stories, or 56 feet in height. It is a reinforced concrete and steel construction, and is faced on the north with brick and on the 3 sides exposed to public view with the Bedford stone we talked about earlier. The window frames themselves were all metal construction, and the building was built by H.B. Nelson Construction Company out of Davenport, Iowa. The first and second story floors are covered, and corridors are covered with terrazzo, and the doors of the offices are all composition wood. A lot of the wood material is still original. The floors are all still original. You can see that the rooms have transoms over them, which are windows that open up at the top of the doors, and this was to promote airflow. They all are still functioning as well. When you walk through these rooms, you'll notice that most of these offices are connected by doorway in between, and the purpose of that is that so a citizen could come and make a circuit of the offices, hitting all the offices they needed to visit without going back into the hallway. The architects designing the building took a look into the future, and a foundation was placed under it so that it might be built higher if necessary. So it's 3 floors right now. It could have a 4th floor added onto it if it was ever wanted. And provision was also made for the installation of an elevator with comparatively little difficulty. There was a closet on each floor that may be turned into an elevator shaft, or one was turned into an elevator shaft here, and then the janitor's closet back there is also capable of being an elevator shaft. So at this point, we're going to walk through each of these rooms here. We are going to go into the basement briefly. I don't think many people have seen down there, but we're not going to spend a lot of time because there are some safety concerns, but there are some pretty cool vaults that we'll look inside of. Say, after I finish showing everyone around, you will be free to walk around yourself and look at the offices and some of the displays put out. I'm just going to go through and talk about everything first. So this office was originally a polling room, and when it wasn't being used for a polling room, it was given over to the GAR. Steve, what was the GAR?
Grand Army of the Republic, so they were Union Civil War veterans.
And then this was also storage used in conjunction with the polling room. And in here is it's an old plat map of the city of Burlington. Back before we had computers, whenever we wanted to look at property lines, we would have to go into this map. So everyone can't fit in this office at once, but after the tour, if you want to come in and look at it, feel free. It's pretty interesting.
What year do you know?
I don't know what year it was. And then we have one in this office that I'll show you that is from what's the original plat map of the city. We're going. And the offices of the Wilmington building and health inspector, and then the city marshal had their office on the very far end of this building. These 2 restrooms have always been these places, and I believe the urinal in the men's restroom is actually original to it.
This is my favorite part of the tour.
Everyone is free to go in the restroom and the urinal is
It's massive.
Yeah. Take a look at the urinal.
A one-time only for those of the very
The city engineers now have in their own building, the Public Works building on division. So they were originally here, and this was their drafting room. And then this office was a blueprint room, which was pretty technologically advanced for the time. A quote from the Hawkeye from Harry Bulmer, the city engineer at the time, said, "It will be of great value. Often," he states, "when weather conditions will not permit the engineering force doing work outside, blueprinting can be done to advantage. Previously, on dull or rainy days when the engineering force could not take their instruments outside, it was impossible to do blueprinting because there was insufficient light. The electricity has overcome this." Also in the engineer's room, there was a vault. The vault is still there. It's used to store property records. If you go inside to the left, the door is no longer there, but the vault structure is still there. You can take a look at it. And now we're going to move down to the basement. We can't all fit down there at once, so we might have to do groups. And there are areas in the basement that you can't go in, but we will be able to see the vaults, and there's also a prepared utility kind of passageway built around the foundation of the building. That's pretty cool.
Why don't you go down and research?
That one was nice, too.
Preparing pipes and other wire, not for storage. No, it runs all the way around the base of the building. It's 6 feet tall, so the person can get in and walk through. We actually, our IT person was working on some of the wiring, and he was in here.
This is the full basement.
Right.
Is it lit or you have to take your own lights?
But
Is it lights in there or you have to take
there
your
are
own
lights, but they're not working right now.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so you take your own flashlight. So this is a 6-foot by 4-foot passageway that runs around the foundation of the building. We have all of our piping in here, so it made it so that you can do repairs because it's not a full basement, so you don't have access to every part of the building underground. And I was telling them earlier, our IT person did recently do some wiring work. You can kind of see the cables running through here, and they run back through there, so it still does get used. This is we have 4 vaults back here that have always been used for storage of financial documents. I have 2 of the vaults unlocked right now, and this door is not locked either, so we can go in and take a look at those. I also let this book out. It's a book of special assessments. It dates back to 1909, and those are things that are besides regular property taxes. So if a street was upgraded and the citizens paid for the street, the record would be in there. We have a lot of those books kind of throughout this area, though. So feel free to walk through the vaults and look around. Just don't touch anything because they might fall apart. They're very old.
What's the oldest they could have?
Around 1800 is what I've been able to find. Or 1890, sorry.
1890?
Yeah. But I haven't gone through all of these files.
Sometime in the 1867, they had to start that.
Yeah.
I should say. It wasn't required.
Sure you can develop prison there.
I'm trying to get out too, so.
Just want to go out when they get it.
Follow the leader.
It's the ladies' part.
It's for repairs and stuff. It goes around the hall, running around the building. Yeah.
Oh, really?
That's what he said. It's like 4 feet wide, 6 feet high, so you can walk it.
Are you still involved with this? Okay, well, here's the people to ask about this. Do you have any?
Looking to get rid of them or buy them?
No, get rid of them.
Yeah, possibly. Yes, old over, it's back when you were old.
At least it's the Valley's Green Address.
Right.
The result of that is that we have
They got a bunch of
Sorry.
all over the country. And because of the difference, so we travel together to
Good. Thank you.
Russ, we took a tour last week, or a couple weeks ago. Okay, great. And we started.
Same last name, first name is Cheryl, Chery.
Thank you, Sarah.
You guys are checking out my lot on there.
Oh, that is kind of cool.
Yes, correct.
Can you?
The city council, they used to have a room where the city manager's room is right now. We can go in there in a minute. They used to conduct most of their business out of that room. And then when they had large crowds, they would move up to the third floor room. The floor was also used to house the offices of superintendents. Back when superintendents were appointed, there was the superintendent of streets and public improvements, and the city council office right now. There was the superintendent of accounts and finance. We have 2 IT offices back there, which used to house the superintendent of accounts and finances, and then the auditor and treasurer. We used to have a parks and public property superintendent through that office right there, and then a city solicitor at the RSVP office. Bathrooms are still original, but the cool urinal has unfortunately been replaced on this floor.
I'll probably in this photo.
And through the city council office, there's another office on the back of that. That was the mayor's private office. I don't think so. They're pretty old.
You should.
You know that guy there? I mean, the way you sat down next to him, I didn't.
Maybe.
Quite a plant.
Yeah, it is.
Dr.
The large one was public meeting, and the smaller one was the bar that was the assessor's private office. This room right now that's used for storage was a Red Cross office, and this was a office for the social services. You can see a picture of the first mayor in this city hall. Mayor. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I saw a story about someone having a loose cable, but instead of thinking it's the power company that cut the cable, they're like, we're not responsible for the cable, it's the cable company responsible for the cable, and then you fight and
Eating area with a bar in front of it. Is Joe Stevens in here?
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about Mayor Smith at all?
Oh, always in the field for that. That was my grandfather. He was the mayor of Burlington when the building was built in '23. And I've got a plaque and got the city council to name the chambers after him because there was nothing done, because he was the longest reigning mayor in the history of Burlington for 7 terms, 14 years. 53, I think, or 55. And all of the information of not only him, but also the city and city hall is at the Heritage Center in a book that I gave to Apple Trees years ago that my mom had. And there's a whole bunch of pictures, a letter from Harry Truman when he met Harry Truman on the Freedom Train. And I've got a picture of him in his private office with my siblings because it was way before me. And that bell was in that picture. So.
Do you know the story behind the bell? I've been told there is.
I don't know, it had to do with the meetings.
Yeah.
My siblings don't like to bring it, but Smith and Stevens. But when we first dedicated, got this dedicated, we had his picture out right behind there, and they designed that, and I like that better, and they put his picture out there. And then the plaque was actually out here with a picture of this now. And the plaque of the Stevens and Smith family went together and purchased it and had it made, and then the picture was painted by Marge Brown. I got her to do before she left town, and then we had a Sunday afternoon dedication to it. Mayor Tim Scott was here, and we had a dedication for the chamber. So my family was proud of his doings and that. His background, he comes from Mystic, Iowa. He was a coal miner. He had a brother-in-law that lived here, and so there was work here, and he got here to Murray Iron Works, and he loved the Mississippi, and his goal was to fish the Mississippi. He worked through the Labors and Trades thing. He got elected as a nominee for mayor, and the rest was history because he never made it to the river. He did. He's out at Sacred Heart Cemetery right now. But he loved fishing, what I hear. So, and of course, see, I was born in '51, so that was his later years, and he passed away in our house when I was like 4 years old. So, but he was a big supporter. One story I kept hearing from my mom was that the Ku Klux Klan wanted to come and march down Jefferson Street, and there was a lot of people in an uproar that they were going to come and march. My grandpa, who was not prejudiced, said, "I'm going to let them march, that's fine." But he said, if the first one that comes down with a hood on them, is I'm walking out in the street and taking it off their hood, because you got to be proud of what you're doing. And they never did march. It's kind of cool.
Thanks, Joe.
He's kind of strong on stuff like that.
Through doing this tour and researching City Hall, we found that there's a lot of stories on City Hall kind of interwoven with the architecture and just the history. And this is our first time doing it, so we have a top-down view of it. But I think if we do this again, which we might do another time, we can dive into some of these stories in more detail, because there's a lot there that it would be interesting to flesh some more of these out. But that's all I have for you today. Feel free to wander around the building. We do need to close it up around 2:15, 2:30, so there's not a whole lot of time left to go through it, but you still have 25 minutes to wander around and look at everything you haven't seen yet.
Charlie, you said that there was a 4th floor
There's
originally designed.
It's designed that you can add a 4th floor.
Yeah.
Right now,
Is there any staircases or anything like that?
there's a space between the roof and the top of this floor right now that houses infrastructure, but it's reachable by ladder, so unfortunately we can't get to it today.
Oh. Oh, no, I'm just interested, so they didn't really plan for a fourth story?
Yeah. I'll add to, I don't know if this was mentioned, so the Kay Weiss did an awesome job transcribing a bunch of articles that helped us kind of put together the research for this. And the article that came out when it was opened, it said that, it talks about the council chambers, the large assembly room, capable of seating approximately 350 people.
Today at 115.
Yeah. They would have crammed in here. Apparently, and we were talking downstairs, all the original desks, and looking around, I didn't see any. The original desks were made by the Leopold Furniture Company, and the chairs were from Chittenden and Eastman, and I do think there are probably a few of the C&E chairs still, like down in the inspector's office, those original wooden chairs. So furniture was locally made as well.
Cool. All right.
Thank you.